you. Chris, and then I'm stopping him.
That's so cute.
Yes, thanks so much. Sorry.
Does this belong to somebody?
Okay. Someone who works on the bar, like asking anyone else for a drink just feels
Wrong. Yeah, like, it's very horrible.
I'm just like, I know something I didn't do much last week. I was actually like stacking the plates, wiping the table. So when I was at Auntie House, I kept picking up pastas and taking them to the bar, and Martha was just like, "What are you doing?" Oh, Martha, what a legend. Absolute legend. Did you meet her? No.
You gotta remind me.
They were the one working at Auntie House.
I don't know if people can hear, but we're just going to wait a few minutes so that people keep rolling in and aim to start within the next 5 minutes. And so yeah, just sit tight. Do we need to wait? It's such a weirdness of like wait around.
Yeah, wait. For everything to I love it as well. I really liked when they got it wrong the last time. What did it call someone like a socialist?
Socialism.
Maybe you should actually like collect some of the
Yeah,
data.
someone should make
from
like
it.
an art piece out of it.
Yeah,
Thank you so
just giving
much.
it to her.
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, good.
Well, speaking of tits.
Speaking of
Hello.
Fenty, I feel like honestly, Fenty should be sponsoring this somehow.
Wouldn't laugh about it. It's like actually very annoying.
Yeah.
I was like, and then when I found out Rihanna quantity, I was absolutely thrilled. I was like, oh my god, I want Rihanna.
Scandalous.
I can't believe that all the people in the world that Rihanna chose to comment on me.
I truly did get the VIP experience.
You do. I mean, it is ridiculous.
The VIP exclusive. Pay £50 a month and get like £50 for it. I remember to cancel. I got three sets and then cancelled, but it's smart to create a new email for every order. I'm gonna get Mohammed to do it next, so like it's just gonna be like Mohammed Daddy Shout ordering like fucking 4 bras, like 5 thongs. Your email now. It's urgent. I was going to tell you the story that I told you. I know, I keep my eye on the little microphone in the corner going, close captioning's out.
It is quite a like weird like social experience, like people that you know are like rolling in and you're like pretending that you don't know that.
Oh, it's quite a few of them. That's good.
Okay, I'd say let's give like 2 more minutes just because I feel like people are kind of still trickling in. Started, but yeah, welcome everyone. I feel like maybe we should have like played some tunes, but we didn't do that because we were too busy again.
We're not ready yet, we haven't had enough practice.
decided she can join a choir.
Oh,
I'm starting our system in that girl band.
yeah, no.
Look, I'm in.
I need an instrument
Genuinely
first.
is.
We need a drummer. We need a drummer. I'll be a drummer.
I can, where can you try? No.
Yeah, I know. It's not gonna work. We need a good drummer.
It's really hard.
We're going to go to open base.
Now picky.
Okay, should we maybe
I'm so down.
get rolling just so that we don't end up being here really late? Cool. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us on the internet. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming along. And we're just going to sort of get started in the interest of not running really far over time. So anyone who doesn't already know, these are the three amazing women behind Sister Midnight, which is, well, I feel like you guys are going to talk a bit about what it is that you're doing in a little bit. But Sister Midnight, from my perspective and like my like fanship, has been for a really long time like a really quite like important DIY venue in South East London, Deptford, that basically faced a very similar fate to like a lot of other non-profit like DIY countercultural cultural institutions. Well, throughout the last couple of years, but also especially at the start of the pandemic. And rather than sort of fizzle away or like try and just like start again or like make a new thing, Lenny, with support of Verity and Sophie, realized that they could try and use this resource, which is maybe a resource that's quite well known in certain like areas of like the left and certain areas of different types of political organizing, but isn't particularly super well known among young people. It isn't particularly super well like known, or people aren't super aware of it in the queer community, among women and among like POC communities. And so they went away, did like shitloads of research and found out about this way that they could try and save this venue that they've been running for a really long time, which is to try and take it into community ownership. And the process of doing that is complex, as I guess you're going to like share with us a little bit, but it's also not impossible. And it's a process that can make possible things that seem impossible, and seems like a really, really important, interesting thing for us to like take seriously and consider and try and think about in relation to the stuff that we really value and that we want to support and keep going. Just a bit about like the reason why we're having this session today and like what we're sort of doing here. So we're beaming out to you from the Horse Hospital, which is a old horse hospital that we are currently sitting in with like cobblestone floors, and there's no stairs, just ramps for the horses, which is basically been like a sort of weird cultural institution for almost 3 decades, that quite similarly in some ways to Sister Midnight has constantly been facing its own failure, like been constantly facing and reckoning with its kind of this fundamental inability to be really, really profitable, but also in recognition and like devotion to the other types of value that it produces, and the communities that it's serving. And the horse hospitals kind of come up against a bit of an impasse, like a limit, in the last couple of years, because there's been multiple campaigns to save the horse hospital from the very, very heavy interest of its landlord to get a much more expensive tenant in, because this is a property in Zone 1, and has managed to utilize a certain type of like community mobilization to get people to just campaign and like sign petitions, like express outcry online or through the media. But there's a certain limit to the type of power that you're really building when you do that type of campaign. And in order for the horse hospital to have like serious longevity, maybe like a slightly deeper question about like what power for a community, what power for like a countercultural community, and what agency really looks like. And that, in order to answer those types of questions, you really have to start thinking quite hard about like, right, well, like, where is money going to come from? Who's going to take control? Who's going to be responsible? Who is this community that's going to own this institution? So we were really interested to talk to Sister Midnight because they're at a very pivotal moment in their like journey towards trying to create a community-owned cultural venue. And we've already had quite a lot of conversations. We've covered quite a lot of topics, some of them very practical, some of them very abstract,
and we'll sort of see like where we get to tonight with that. But first of all, 3 of them just wanted to really like use this moment to just share some knowledge and just share some skills and just like let people ask some questions about stuff that is often quite heavily mystified. So I'm going to pass over to you, and then we'll just run this in quite an open way. There's not so many of us here, so we can just sort of chat. Feel free to write in the chat if you don't want to jump in with your words. And we're all just really excited to be here together and have a big old chat.
Nice one. Thanks for introing us, George. So I'm Lenny.
I'm Verity. Hiya.
I'm Sophie. Collectively, we are the founding group of Sister Midnight Community Venues Limited, or as we're more colloquially known, just Sister Midnight. George has given us a little bit of an intro as to how we've come about, but essentially Sister Midnight started in 2018. It was previously a record shop and grassroots venue that I'd volunteered at for 4 years throughout my degree. In the final term of my degree, my boss decided that he was going to close it down and pass on the lease to someone who wanted to turn it into a cheese and wine bar. So I basically told him, fuck no. And we bought the rights to the lease, and thus Sister Midnight was born. And it was a beautiful place to be for a couple of years. But with the pandemic hitting and all the other issues around the long-term viability of these kind of DIY spaces, it came to a point where we weren't really able to continue with what we were doing. We had to leave our space in Deptford. And yeah, that was like a turning point for me in realizing that, yes, I want to continue what I've been doing and providing a platform for grassroots music and for the punk scene in South London, which I'm like so invested in. But I want to create somewhere that's going to be sustainable long term, not somewhere that's going to pop up for 2 years and then close again, or someone that's going to be constantly at risk or fighting an uphill battle against rent increases or insanely expensive overheads and licensing costs. So that was when Verity and Sophie came on board, and we founded the new Sister Midnight, a community benefit society. Disused local park, bringing it into community ownership and running it as a grassroots live music space and community pub. I'll let Verity and Sophie tell you a little bit about how they got involved with Sister Midnight.
Yeah, so Lenny reached out to us around a similar time, wasn't it, back in February? Me and Sophie used to work together. We set up Social Record Society, which is like a vinyl collective that's still running in South East. But essentially, I think the reason why we wanted to jump on board was like a mixture of reasons. It was like more because we always loved the community music vibe that was down in South East anyway. Like we both ran events at Sister Midnight, the original, but then also we set up events like all across South East, the original. I know, so this is like the new baby of Sister Midnight.
The OG Sister Midnight.
Yeah, I know, it's good. And I think now it's just kind of like become this really amazing, I think, very small organization. Like a lot of the reason why I think we jumped on board as well as so many other things that come in tie with the pub. So like it's a restorative project in terms of like heritage. That's why I think I found it so interesting. As well, I just think that from seeing so many venues collapsing over COVID, it's just this, I think, a very big collective vibe of knowing that the only way to move forward really is something that's more sustainable, which is community ownership, because a monopolization of venues is not a way to move forward in terms of kind of like growing grassroots kind of live music essentially. But I guess so. Is there anything you would add to that as well?
Yeah, and I guess there was like, I mean, I saw it from when you first put out your first community consultation to see if like the community in South East London, like your direct community, like it reached far, but it was still in the bubble of South East, and so many people were excited about it. When I first saw the consultation, I was gassed about it, you know. So I think there's like an appetite for something like this, and I think that's kind of what's driven us to this point, knowing that like people want a space like this, that people want initiatives like this. They might not know much about it, but just the first glance of a project like this, people were super keen to like help out in any way they could. So.
And I think like the kind of enthusiasm that we got even from that first community consultation is a big part of the reason why like our mission has not only become just to set up this new space and continue Sister Midnight's cultural legacy, but also to pass on this kind of knowledge that we've gained. Like we've done 9 months of solid learning and it's just been so mentally intense, but it's been great as well. And we've learned these skills and these tools that we think we can just pass on to our community, and we'll see way more projects like this springing up.
When you say that you did this like first community consultation, what did that look like? Like how did you do that?
It was a Google form.
And where would people have found it? Like where was it?
We basically just put it out on Sister Midnight's social media, and then it was really just a campaign of like tagging bands and, you know, industry figures and being like, hey, we have this really cool idea. Maybe could you like maybe put it out for us and like spread the word? And it just grew quite quickly. We got like a little bit of coverage in local press, which was great. We had a Vice article mention, you know, see the dream of these kind of projects that you get into Vice or Dazed or something. But
sorry, no, go. I was going to say, I would say though, if you don't have like a connection, say like to, and access to like, say a number of people already, like to source out a Facebook community, quite a large outreach as well. Like if, for example, like you can think of other ways you could get to a lot of people. And then from there, it kind of just rolls on. Word of mouth, I think, would always be the best way to kind of go about things. Like whether your community is quite small, like I think initially our community was tight knit in terms of the music scene, but now it's kind of grown onto kind of like other members of like the borough, I would say. So it's kind of grown bigger and bigger, and it's definitely something you have to start off small, but it's the tactical ways of kind of putting the word in, I think.
And we'll have loads more useful tips like that throughout the talk, but we'll get started onto like the real content of what we want to share with you guys, which is kind of the 5 steps of like the sort of key points that we've been through in terms of setting up a project like this. We would encourage like everyone to just jump in and throw out your comments at us, like either on the mic or in the chat. But before we start, I think so that we can kind of tailor the discussion to like everyone's reasons for being here, it'd be really cool if we could just go around and like hear a little bit from everyone about why they've joined the seminar today, and like if you're trying to achieve like a similar kind of community project, like tell us a bit about it so that we can sort of get the most useful information at you, basically. So shall we start with Rebecca?
There's like videos going on.
Yeah. Yeah, Rebecca, if you can hear us, do you want to jump on the mic if you're comfortable and just like tell us a little bit about why you're here and what it is you're doing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Loud and clear.
I'll turn on my video. I'm here. I just jumped on. Hi. I just jumped on the video or the programming because I met Mean through her other counterpart of her collective in San Francisco not long ago. And I used to run a community space for 9 years in San Francisco. And in the end, it wasn't sustainable for me, you know, just because I had to make a living and it just got in the way. And in some ways, I regret not continuing with it. And I made a lot of cultural connections and I got a lot of cultural collateral from it, but I couldn't find a way to make it sustainable for myself. So I thought this would be interesting to see if there's any tools or ideas that you had if I ever wanted to start another space in the same sort of vein. So that's what made me interested in this, in your talk.
Great. And what kind of community business was it? What was like the kind of focus of what you were doing, if you don't mind me asking?
It was an art gallery, and so I curated shows, and then I invited people to curate their own shows, and so it was more like a curatorial platform where I invited people to be really quite experimental. So I didn't quite grasp the commercial end of things, so I didn't like push sales, and I was more interested in relationships with art writers and people, the writing that has to do with the artwork, the criticism, and that sort of thing. And so I think it was just a real experimental kind of ground. And it was interesting because at the time, the curatorial department started opening up at the art schools. And so there's a lot of conflict because I didn't have a curatorial background. And so the curators, it was interesting to see them who are studying curating, they would come into the space and kind of attack it because I didn't have an education and they did. And so since then, it forced me to really educate myself about curatorial studies. And so I've done it in this really kind of DIY way, but it was interesting because that kind of antagonism like pushed me further to think about these relationships. I'm not a curator anymore, but I think in a curatorial way, and the way that I gather information and gather different artworks and different artists for my research projects. So I would say that the curatorial aspect is what drew me in.
Nice, that sounds really interesting. I'd love to hear more about it sometime.
Oh,
That'd be really cool. I studied
Yeah.
fine art, so I have a lot of interest in that, and also in the kind of way that elitism operates in the art world, because boy, did I experience my fair share of it studying at CSM. Matthew, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're up to? I kind of know what you're up to, but tell everyone.
Hi, Lenny. Hi. I'm Matt. I got in contact with Lenny, I think yesterday. I was given the details of this project by the Plunkett Foundation. So I'm based in Southwark, in the Walworth area, and we're at an earlier stage, well, a very early stage, of a project where we're looking to set up a community pub. And we haven't got a venue. We've got a couple of venues we're targeting, but we haven't finalised it. We're at the stage we're at is we're trying to start our engagement, and we've got an event on Sunday where we'll be meeting a lot of the community and part of the community and a part of Walworth to sort of talk about what the ideal pub is, talk about the heritage of pubs in the areas. And I think our aim is to set up a venue that I know it sounds a bit sort of vague, but set up a venue where lots of different sections of the community can come together, somewhere much more representative than what's out there, something that isn't just sort of a business targeted at a section of the community, selling cheese and wine, for example, or either very hipster or very white and middle class. And I suppose why clearly there's going to be a lot we can learn from Sister Midnight and all the work you've done so far. And I'm really interested in sort of how you've run the project, the roles and the skills, really particularly how you widen involvement and get it beyond kind of the usual suspects. So for us, you've got, we can draw on there's lots of political activists who are interested, or, the usual suspects of community groups, but how do we get a bit wider? And then fundraising, we'd love money. So how fundraising is really intimidating for a big project.
Well, fundraising we can certainly help you on, because I have written a lot of funding applications in the last 18 months and been fortunate to have a lot of support doing them, so we've been quite successful. So we figured out what boxes you need to tick now to get funding applications, and we'll touch on that a bit while we're talking, but also just outside of this talk, obviously we'll keep in touch, and we're happy to support you and your group with making applications to all the funds that we've applied to, so that you can get some funding through as well.
Amazing, thank you.
All right, who's next?
You love this.
Evelyn?
Hey, I'm going to keep my camera off because, sorry, I'm in my kitchen, so if you hear the washing machine going, that's what it is. I'm part of the summer school that's happening right now at the Horse Hospital. So there was already an event with you guys, which is really great, just for the participants of the summer school. And I'm here in two capacities. I'm managing the chat for the Horse Hospital, but also keen to just hear more about the details of the project. And I think, basically things that other people have covered, things like funding being a big thing, and also interested in definitions of community, and how how to kind of like understand who is your community and who are you kind of reaching through community projects. That's kind of all I have to say.
Alex, do you want to join in?
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, my phone's doing something really weird. It's because it's through Eventbrite rather than just straight Zoom. So I'm just like, what's going on? Anyway, good. So work well done. I am heavily involved in the community energy and co-op sector. I live in Greenwich. I'm a co-founder of SELSI, South East London Community Energy, and we set up as a BENCOM, a type of co-op 7 years ago, using people from the community who didn't know each other. We do renewable energy generation and fuel poverty tackling projects and all sorts of wonderful, exciting things. And also I'm involved with other groups around London, and I've also voluntary director for GCDA, which is started off as a cooperative development agency. I was a worker for them for a while, and then I've become a voluntary director for them. But why am I?
Alex. So we know Salsi and also the CEO of GCDA is on our steering group. Alex, I think we've lost you.
Oh no.
But if you can hear us, we know all about Salsi. You guys are amazing.
Has that come back yet?
You're back. We can hear you now.
All right. Okay. I'll try turning my camera off and see if that helps. Okay. So why am I here? I'm here because, SELSI, GCDA, co-ops and community energy. But I'm also interested to hear how you guys more recently have gone on the exciting journey of learning about co-ops and legal structures and raising finance and funding stuff and all the gazillion things you never knew that you didn't know before you started trying to do anything crazy like the brilliant things we do. And what particularly attracted me was the question about the white middle class issue. And it was interesting. Someone else touched on the kind of elitist attitude of things and how to sort of iron that out more in what we do. But I think, it's how much you utilized or connect with the resources that are already out there to help people get going to do, whether it's a community share offer or start a co-op or start a community asset purchase or whatever people wanted to do, and how accessible and user-friendly that was, and also to sort of reflect on how what we can do better and collaborate and learn off each other and share war stories and all that sort of stuff. So that's a very vague answer to your question, but I will leave it there. Thank you.
No, that's great. And I was just saying that we know SELSI. We were chatting to Giovanna at the beginning of our project about how we might collaborate with you guys on getting some solar panels and a ground source heat pump installed at the Ravensbourne, if we can bring it into community ownership, so that we can produce all our own green energy on site. So it'd be great to keep that conversation going. Also, Claire from GCDA is on our steering group, so we're sort of crossing over on a couple of fronts there. So it'll be great to chat a bit more. Mina? Okay, all right. Cool. Mina is gonna,
Yeah, I've just seen that.
gonna skip her intro, but she explains it all in the chat. Yuja?
Hi, very nice to see you. Well, a brief like introduction to my background. I'm basically studying curating as a degree. And I just feel like there's so much talk about community engagement, but it's very complicated in practice. And I just want to know more about how you connect, or what you define as the community, and what you how you connect with them, and what are the pains and pleasures in that work. I just want to like hear more about your practice, and yeah, looking forward to the session.
Great, thank you. It's really good to have you here. Nikki?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Hey.
Hiya. I guess I saw this online, and I just thought a community-owned pub sounded like a great idea, and wanted to hear some more about it. I'm involved in a couple of other like small community projects there, and I think, just learning more about how people do community practice is just really interesting. So yeah.
Cool. Great to have you here. Thank you.
Oh, cheers.
Anna? Have you got Anna in the scene? If not, we can come back. Who else have we got in here? I can't see everyone's screen. Oh yeah, Danny. Hey.
Hey, how's it going, people? Yeah, so my name's Danny. Pronouns he, him. Working on Half Punk, Half Panther, which is the DIY punk collective that hopefully will be tackling issues around mixed race erasure and like binaries and fuckeries of racism that we're putting up with today. Sorry, excuse the French. It's been a long day. But yeah, I'm here because obviously fully support the project, and like 100% want to back it and like hear more. I'll be coming down to the Fox and Firkin as well next week. You know what I mean? So yeah, gang. Anyway, yeah. Oh, that's me signing off for now. Yeah, keep it up in a bit.
Sweet, thank you. Anna, if you can hear us and you want to do an intro now, or just at any point jump in and intro yourself because you haven't had a chance, that's cool. But otherwise we'll get cracking. So yeah, I think as we've said, like the reason for doing this Skillshare is because the more accessible like the sort of tools and knowledge around creating co-ops and creating community businesses are, that like I think the more diversity we'll see in the space. And like something that we have been really keen to do from the outset of our project is get a more diverse demographic involved with setting up these kind of projects and helping to continue them. Before we sort of get into the discussion, I feel like it's probably really important to acknowledge that we are all white and middle class, but we are young women, some of us are LGBTQ+, and so we're coming at it from like a slightly different angle than some of you might be, and we accept that there are areas where we're not going to be really best placed to talk about how we can make these spaces more accessible to working class or to POC communities, because we can't speak for them. But I think that there is something to be said just for like putting this knowledge out there and for trying to make it more available. And even beyond this talk, like do hit us up for more info, more knowledge, more help, and like pass that offer on to anyone like we're here, this is what we want to do with Sister Midnight. So any help and support that we can lend, we will give, but we don't claim to be experts in every area of it. But yeah, so do you want to kick off by just telling everyone about how sort of community businesses are defined? Because Power to Change give a really useful 4-step kind of definition of what community businesses are.
So Power to Change, actually one of our early funders, we actually were awarded track 1 and track 2, which has basically just helped us with the early developments of the projects, just so you know what no one knows how it changes. I think they're lottery funded as well.
Yeah, they're like a big sort of like research body working in the community ownership and co-op space. And yeah, they distribute a lot of funding, but all of theirs has come from the National Lottery, I think.
Yeah. But what they define as like a community venue, and what they would be looking to fund is something that is one, locally rooted. So it started by local people and will benefit the community that surrounds it, basically. The next one is accountability to the local community, which means that the local community must have a genuine say about how that business is run, and can have an input into it in some form. And it must also trade for the benefit of the local community. And this means that community businesses sell services and products that are produced in their local area. So, for example, when we hopefully start trading at the Ravensbourne Arms, we'll be looking to like work with local breweries or other businesses that which means that we can be helping like our surrounding community in motion.
Yeah, support the local economy.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
And then the next, another one of the 4 steps is, the next one is to have a broad community impact. And this means that we will engage with a variety of different groups in the community and address different community needs. So we won't just be like a pub. We'll be able to offer a lot more services than that. We'll be able to have community groups use the space, disadvantaged groups. It will be a space where people can come to us with ideas, local groups can come to us, like activist groups, and we'll be able to facilitate them, basically.
And community businesses are really just so important, because I think it's a type of business model that subverts this sort of traditional profit-making capitalist model that we've all come to know and resent. And I think everyone probably on this call can recognize that, particularly in terms of like the cultural sector, we need models that are going to be more sustainable long term, that don't focus on squeezing profit out of people and their labor and the products and services they can provide. Yeah, like I think like anyone who works in like a community or a cultural sector will know what it's like to be just overworked and exhausted and really not seeing that translate into the kind of money that you would expect for the work you're putting in. So yeah, business models that kind of shift away from that traditional focus on like pure profitability and focus more on like what they can do for the communities that they exist in, and like what benefit they're bringing to the wider areas that they're situated in. And that's kind of really what we're looking to do with the Ravensbourne Arms is, you know, if we can save this pub and get this building, we just want to squeeze it, not for profit, for all the benefit that it can bring to our local community. And rather than making people, a small group of people, like richer financially, it can make a whole community richer on like an emotional and a cultural level, and just like really like manifest well-being for everyone who's involved with it. Oh, thanks. I ripped that sentence off from our PR person. I should credit her because she's amazing. Alex Carroll, everyone.
No. But yeah, like just to add to that, like it's just about, I think, keeping an eye, like as we said before, like you can't really start a community project if you don't really understand your community or what everyone kind of like wants or needs, or like what's a necessity amongst the community, and like what kind of people like will be investing, and you know, that kind of gives you an answer as to what kind of thing they would like to invest in moving forward. But it's about kind of being as responsive as possible. I think like the way that we kind of like rolled into it, and like obviously Lenny guiding, is that we had the existing kind of DIY punk culture first for Sister Midnights. That's like that was an entry point, but it could be anything. Yeah. It's a business plan that can copy and paste like onto an art gallery, or like anything from an art gallery to a pub to a venue to a grocery store. It's something that can literally copy and paste in a way that will benefit a community and create a really strong local economy. So it's so important. yeah, I think to actually make it a bit more of an international thing as well, just being localized.
Yeah, for sure. So if we were going, so we're sort of structuring this today as like 5 steps to setting up your own community business. And what we would say is that is step 1. You've got to identify who are your community, what are their needs, and how can you best serve them. So in terms of identifying your community, there's a lot of ways to think about that. And I think sometimes the sort of like the term community is like not necessarily so helpful, because there is the wider community, which in terms of how we're thinking of Sister Midnight and the Ravensbourne Arms, it's just anyone. That could be anyone who lives in Lewisham or South London or London or the southeast of England who wants to come to a community pub. It could be anyone who works in music or the music scene or creative industries or the brewing industry up and down the country or across the globe who's going to benefit from this pub existing. So community is really a wide term, and I think actually is what is more helpful to think about is specific communities. So within Sister Midnight and the kind of like existing demographic that we have in our customer base, there are a lot of like very distinct communities. We've got the LGBTQ plus community, the queer community, we've got the art school community, we have in our area, Southeast London, very strong African, Caribbean, Southeast Asian communities. And it's really just thinking about what are the specific needs of all these different communities and like how can they best be served. And in our example, we're just really lucky that what we want to do is music, and music is like such a unifying part of culture that it kind of translates to pretty much any community that you can think of. But when you're thinking about the kind of business that you want to deliver, like you need to think about the way that that's going to intersect with the different communities that exist in your local area, because that's going to form up the sort of wider community that you're serving. And I think you need to identify sort of who's around you and what are their specific needs. And a really good way to kind of like think about what kind of businesses that you might want to create is like, what does your community crave? Like, what is it that people are really lacking? And for us, we found in Southeast London, it was venue spaces that were accessible, affordable, inclusive, and had ethics and politics. I think a lot of people are sick of going down the local booze or going to venues and not seeing it reflect the changing politics of the sort of wider area. Like Lewisham, for context, is very historically Labour, always have been a Labour seat, very left-wing, quite radical. Our council down here has just been nominated status as Borough of Sanctuary because of their work lobbying the government to take more refugees into the country and providing housing for refugees within the borough. So there's definitely like a very left-leaning political sentiment in Lewisham that we're not necessarily seeing reflected in the kind of businesses that we have here. And that's not to discredit any of the businesses operating in the borough, but sometimes it's very, very difficult when you're trying to produce a profit from a business to do anything which alienates any groups. And that is another reason why we want to look for a model that can be more sustainable, is because Sister Midnight has always had very strong ethics. And that sometimes has been to the detriment of the profit-making element of the business. For example, we've always been very outspoken on transgender rights. And as a result, we were targeted quite maliciously by TERF groups. For anyone who's not familiar with the concept of TERFs, TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. And there are a number of groups that operate in South London who are of the ideology that people basically shouldn't have the right to self-identify their gender. And as a result, they kind of deem the existence of transgender individuals to be invalid. And so we had the front of our shop vandalized. We had people from TERF groups coming in trying to intimidate us, wearing t-shirts with really transphobic slogans on. It's a difficult thing when a business starts to stand up for the ethics that it believes in. And so you need to have a sustainable business model to back it up if that's the kind of business that you want to run, because you have to accept that there are going to be people who don't like you standing your ground, and they're not going to give you their customers as a result.
And that's exactly the complication, I think, of starting anything that of this like type of like kind of work or business is that you don't necessarily know everyone in your community, so you don't necessarily know what other types of groups would be completely against what you're trying to set up. There's lots of different reasons as to why people might react negatively to a proposition that you make or an idea that you have, but don't use it as a reason not to push forward and do it, because I do think that you can still gather support, and even groups that can be critical and again like operate in areas to obviously basically be disgusting and not very nicely behaved to anyone that we personally know, but also like the wider population of transgender people. It's just something that's unavoidable. So it's like, how do you go about trying to manage the communication with people that will be upset by things that you propose, and how do you propose yourself? Like, how do you want to come across these people, and how do you educate people and incite change? It's not about alienating these people, but it's about like kind of facilitating spaces that can kind of draw up conversation and hopefully foster a better relationship.
Sure. I think it's important to say that, you know, it's not like a prerequisite as a community business that you have like very strong and outwardly presented political views, but I do think that for engaging marginalized groups within your communities, it's important to be upfront about what you stand for and how you're willing to like dismantle the barriers to inclusion that people from marginalized groups face in the kind of spaces that you're trying to set up. So yeah, it's not an essential, but like just from a personal point of view, I would strongly encourage everyone to be very vocal about the kind of groups that they want to include and how they're planning to do that. And a really great way to sort of gauge what it is that your community needs, what it wants, what are the best ways to include the largest possible demographic of your community is community consultation, which is the first thing that we did kicking off this project back in January, 9 months ago. And there are a lot of ways to do community consultation. Ours was super basic because at the time it was lockdown and you couldn't meet up in person. So we did ours by a Google form, just asking people, you know, if we did manage to save this pub, you know, would they back it? Did they think it was important for the area? What would they want to see there? How many times a week did they think they would visit? And crucially, how much would they be willing to invest in seeing a space like this brought to fruition? And we just did that online and through sort of System Midnight's existing social media networks. Obviously, if you don't have an existing customer base like we did, it makes it a little bit more difficult, but not impossible. Just share it with your family, friends. And as Verity pointed out earlier, like tackling local community groups on Facebook is such a great way to get a really good spread of coverage. Tweeting at like key industry figures, yeah, like Soph was on tweet duty for most of that campaign.
Yeah. Who were you at in?
A lot of like, obviously because it's music related, a lot of like BBC DJs, I don't know, Rough Trade, like shared it out, like kind of like big people like that who would share on a platform that had quite a lot of followers. That was kind of key.
Yeah, and that was really good for like building the awareness in the first instance, and also just like talk to your local news outlets. Like even the small ones have a surprising amount of reach, and it can really build confidence in what you're doing for people to see it like presented even in just like small local news. So that was another really crucial part of it. But now that we're all allowed to sit in rooms together again, if you can facilitate like in-person discussions, I feel like those would be so productive to starting off these kind of projects, kind of like what Matt is going to be doing this Sunday in Walworth, just like getting the community together to talk about the pubs that are out there that need saving and like what the potential is for like each pub, and you know how they might come together and target it. And those kind of events are like really, really important for just bringing people together and networking and understanding like what are the existing skills you've got out there in the community, what are the things that people want, and like how can you pull together to achieve it. So that's really like the first step, is like, you know, identifying who are your community, what do they need, and how, like what business can best serve them. And, you know, part of that as well is finding if your business is something that needs a physical space, which often with community businesses they are, trying to identify that space. And I think an important thing to say there is like commercial space is like a really, really weird one to to try and seek out. Don't be disheartened if you go on Rightmove and you see like literally just 2 properties in your local area, because that's not how you find them. Yeah, right, like there's, you know, check Rightmove, but it's not the whole hog. Definitely like register with local estate agents, tell them about the kind of place that you're looking for, but also just go to your local council. A lot of the time councils have directories of like empty properties or have links with different estate agents. They might even own properties.
Yeah, and like another big tip as well, like now would be if you can search for a grade 2 listed building, kind of like Horse Hospital, that hasn't actually been renovated or converted yet, I would definitely say target that, because you're going to get definitely more funding in terms of like heritage restoration, like all of that stuff that is really useful. But yeah,
There's also just like less competition, because it's really hard to turn a building that has to have only ramps into an office block. And like once your like cobblestone floor gets listed, it's like much harder to make it into like a luxury flat.
or hot desking.
So also just be like a bit cheeky with it. Like if your local pub has been boarded up for the best part of 6 months, or there's like a shop on your high street that you haven't seen operating for like a year, like you can go onto the HM land registry, and for like £3 you can buy the deed, so you can find out like who owns that property, and it's like a super cheap way to get more info on like who owns it and what's going on with it. And just ask. Like sometimes you can literally just get a really good deal on a disused building just by asking, and the landlord might be someone who's like really distant or like lives in a foreign country and hasn't even thought about it, and you can come and say, look, well, we want to bring this building into community ownership and make it into this really cool thing, and we'll make you an offer at market rate. And they'll just think like, hell yeah, well that's one less thing off my hands, because they'll be paying rates on the property to be sat empty. So definitely like don't just restrict yourself to like what is marketed as available, because there are sites out there that you won't even have thought of. So yeah, that's kind of our tip in terms of looking for sites. Like, yeah, just think outside the box and really contact like your local council and your local authorities, because they know what's out there. They know so much about it. Has anyone got any questions or like points they want to raise before we go on to step 2 and talk about business structures? No. We'll assume that we're all good to carry on, but if anyone has
I've got a question, it's Alex. So when I've started our community businesses, we had the luxury of having in-person events, but you mentioned you did all of your community consultations solely online, and you relied on the kind of word of mouth social media. You didn't really have a kind of list or a resource, and it was interesting to hear about getting the link boosted like rough trade in places, but to have that local perspective, how much was it from the kind of, you know, within 2 miles of where your geography is, and how did you engage the more sort of physical local community rather than just the kind of shared values or aspirations or interest community?
That came from a lot of the Facebook groups, because South East London has quite large, like the Telegraph Hill. I don't know if you guys live in South London, but the Telegraph Hill notice board, like there's Brockley ones and Ladybell ones. Each areas of South London have quite active groups on Facebook, and I think they really are a way to target a bit of a wider demographic of the community, of all ages.
Yeah, that definitely helped us like target more people close to us. Like I think it was also surprising how many people responded to the initial consultation online and just said, you know, I live 5 minutes around the corner from the Ravensbourne. So like, even though we were doing it online, we somehow managed to retain this like very local reach. And I think that really was just kind of the places that we were reaching out to. But I think it's important to acknowledge that obviously this is London, in like a major city, and in South London where there's typically quite a like left-wing community sort of leaning, which made it a lot easier for us to engage with people in this way. If you're doing this in like a rural community or a city that has sort of like less defined communities, in person is like super important, and just like going out and doing flyering and stuff.
Yeah, so recently I've just been doing a bit of like research on like other places that we would target kind of in a more physical setting, and like flyering is one way of doing it really well, but that would be like train stations, like catching people out of their like commute from work. But if it was more in terms of sharing a consultation, I would target physically like PA meetings at school. So PA meetings, sports clubs, just be present as possible. So you want to kind of show face at a lot of different other kind of community events that might be happening, like markets. If you have a farmer's market, be there, ask for a stall, say you're a not-for-profit, you're not selling anything, and most of the time they'll give you a table. It's just anywhere you can show face and be a part of like a local conversation. You'll eventually pick up people that do it, like live and exist within kind of like a certain mileage, but it's always good to kind of like do digital outreach first with as many people as possible, because then it does end up inciting a little bit more kind of a local kind of word of mouth process, like you said.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think just like utilize the existing networks out there. Don't be afraid to like ask existing community organizations and things like Veritas says, like sports clubs, schools, to put the word out there, because a lot of times people are like more game for this than you would think. And I think just like sort of latching on, that sounds really like parasitic, but latching on to the kind of existing networks out there and like passing information through them is like a lot of how this.
No, that's utilizing the existing networks. That's energy efficiency. That's totally my like bag, so that's fine. So out of interest, just a follow up. So how many people responded to the online petition, and how did you connect with people? Because quite a lot of people who have got English as a second language don't have access to digital means, or are computer literate, or they're older and they have lower skills in this area. How did you connect with them?
Well, I think that's a really important point to raise, is that we found it really difficult to connect with certain demographics of the community because of the situation we found ourselves in, having to put out a lot of stuff digitally. And that's kind of hindered the overall diversity of people involved in the project that we see now. You know, a lot of the people who are involved working with us and volunteering with us are from a younger demographic. They are the kind of people who would be able to engage with Google Forms and surveys and social media. And that's something that was, you know, really disappointing to us, but was unfortunately a bit of just the circumstance of the times that we were doing this in. To answer how many people responded to the survey, it was 840 in the space of 10 days.
That's mad.
Yeah, which we were really
That's
pleased with, because I went
amazing.
thank you. Yeah, I went into it thinking if we could get 200, that's
incredible. Also, I feel like that's also like a testament to like the type of organization that you had been for like a long time. And I feel like community outreach is like, it's not a science, it's like an art or whatever. And like sometimes you don't like realize that you've already been doing quite a lot of community outreach. And like it's very unusual where you could put out a Google form and even 100 people would reply. Like the nature of the type of organization that you were operating at Sister Midnight, like was in itself like a community engagement exercise. Like you had like an open door policy, like that in itself, and like going forward, like that's as much part of like the principles and like practice of like community outreach as like all of these like kind of intensive like intentional things are as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, yeah, while we were like super impressed with the results of like how many people responded to the survey, and like it's really great to hear, George, do you think that's like a sort of testament to how we were doing things, because that was always the kind of the culture that we wanted to foster at Sister Midnight, even if it was on sort of a less like explicit level. Like I guess it just sort of happened because it was like what we wanted to do, and we didn't think about it in these kind of terms. But yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that like we're not sitting up here saying we've done the best job at creating like a really diverse community project, because we've come up against a lot of barriers. And I think a lot of the work that we have to do in making the Ravensbourne an inclusive and accessible and diverse space is going to come once we have the space and once we throw those doors open. And like there was also a lot of learning that we had to do, and realizing that there are certain like demographics of our community that don't necessarily feel welcome in pub and venue spaces, and there are barriers there to be dismantled that we can't really like tear down by doing an online survey or in-person events or like anything in the lead up to this project being established. It's really a case of like, what kind of culture do we create once we have that space, and how can we create an ongoing process of assessing what we're doing, and are we making this business the most inclusive it can be, and like, are we meeting the needs of marginalized groups within our communities?
I think we've got a hand up from Danny.
Yeah, go for it, Danny.
Yeah, no, just kind of a bit on that point of like kind of, I guess, community outreach. Are there any communities in particular that kind of come to mind that you really wish that you were able to get a hold of? And do you like, what were those, or do you have any idea of what the barriers were to kind of linking up with them? Or is it just as simply like, because I know you mentioned digital, but I think like for instance, I've got Muslim friends who might not be like, who are really into music, but maybe might not be so inclined to go into a pub. And I don't know if that's kind of part of the vision or not, but I'm just kind of wondering, like, in your kind of, I'm kind of waffling now, sorry, apologies. But in your kind of future vision, which communities would you like to see more engagement from?
Well, we would like to see, you know, in an ideal world, like all communities engaging with the Ravensbourne Arms. I think it's really interesting that you bring up Muslim communities in particular. There isn't like a massive Muslim community down in Lewisham, but it does exist. We're right near the Lewisham Islamic Centre. So we definitely want to link up with them. It's something that we are conscious of in terms of when you're a space that sells alcohol, depending on people's like religious beliefs, that itself may be a barrier to them coming into nights where we don't serve any alcohol, that might be more inclusive to people from those communities. Definitely something that we have discussed is that like we will have halal options on our menu. We will have like a range of non-alcoholic drinks available. So we're not just thinking like lime and soda for anyone who isn't drinking, like we will have nice mocktails, juices, fizzy drinks, because I think that sometimes that it seems really basic, but like it is lacking in a lot of spaces you go to. Like my partner's Muslim, and like a lot of times you go to pubs and it's like, oh, what have you got that like isn't alcoholic? And they're like, water. It's like, yeah, like no, that's not good enough. Like so that is something we're kind of thinking of quite consciously. And I think, again, like I said, a lot of that process is, you know, we can think about these issues up front, but there will be a lot of learning that happens once we open the space as to how we like continually develop the way that we're doing things to be more inclusive. And I think that's a process that we need to open up to the community and make sure that there are these mechanisms in place for feedback, so that it's not just like free white people self-assessing like, oh, are we doing a good job at being inclusive? That like we have people's voices and like have people able to tell us their experiences of using our space and like where we're failing, where we're like succeeding.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's just an ongoing dialogue. Like, even though you've done all this preparation, it will be like continuously kind of encouraging feedback from all the groups as they kind of come in. No, that's wicked. Thank you.
I guess that's the one of the benefits of being a non-profit and not a profit-driven organization, is that we'll be able to have nights, and like you said, that could be like alcohol-free, because we might not need to, we won't have the same pressures, you know. And I think that is like one of the beauties of kind of our community structure.
That's a real problem actually with profit-driven music venues. It's like, honestly, make so much money on bar spend. Yeah. And so the idea for a lot of music venues that are really relying on that profit and that money coming in, of like doing a night where it's like, you know, no alcohol and all the drinks are like half the price that you'd usually sell your average drink at, like that can be quite a worrying thing. And so, yeah, like Soph says, you know, moving away from this profit-driven model and like hopefully having like the financial means to like have a night where it's like, okay, we're not going to make as much as if we were selling like 1,000 pints, I think that's like
That's
that's no, that's realistic though. Like you'll shift 1,000 pints in a night. I shit you not. But also, that's just the three of us. But also, alcohol-free nights mean that we can engage with under 18s as well. And particularly in Lewisham, there is a complete lack of provision for under 18s music nights. And I know personally that that saved me from being bored out of my mind as a teenager, just being able to nip down to a local gig. And it's shocking to me that that thing doesn't still exist more, but I understand that the pressures that venues are under and why they can't deliver these nights, particularly with licensing pressures, it can be difficult. But
and I think that's what kind of like our project's about. It's like reinventing a pub on the basis of like what's kind of like needed amongst like the culture that we're surrounded by and like what our community needs. And it's like we're not going into this to create a not-for-profit pub. We're going into it to create a not-for-profit venue that will be a pub, but also coexist as a kind of multifunctional space that will serve all sorts of different types of things going on at the same time. Like the beer and the alcohol won't be the centralized kind of thing of the pub. It will be so much more than that. It will kind of like take people's eyes away from hopefully just being the alcohol being sold. That will be secondary. That will be like a benefit for us as a not-for-profit to make profit, to return back into the pub itself. But what actually is important is all the other different things that we'll set up to kind of change people's minds about what pub actually can be.
Totally. And as a not-for-profit, like also you are eligible for a lot more funding, which can support your turnover and your overheads and your financial needs, which is a great segue into step 2 of identifying the best business structure. So business structures and legal structures for your business are super important because they all come with different requirements, different benefits, different like pros and cons. There are a few that we're going to talk about, although there are like lots of different ways to set up a business and have it benefit the community. We're going to focus on 4 different structures. So that is a cooperative, community benefit societies, charities, and CICs or community interest companies. So we'll start with community interest companies. They're kind of one of the easiest structures to work with. I should head this up by saying like I'm no expert on this, but like I'm just going to tell you guys what I know, and like please go off and do your own research and fact check, because I don't claim to be some like legal whiz who knows everything about community business structures. But CICs or community interest companies are something of a midway point between like a sort of not-for-profit community-owned structure and a private limited company. So a community interest company has an asset lock. An asset lock basically means that all the assets of the business cannot be sold off for private profit. So if, for example, your company were to go out of business and you have a bunch of assets, so in the case of a music venue, you've got a PA system, a couple of turntables. If you sell those assets and make money from them, no one individual can take that money out of the business. It has to be redistributed for the benefit of the community. CICs can have directors who take dividends from the business, so you can operate for profit. And you don't have like any specific mechanisms by which the community has control over the business or has a direct say in it, but with CICs, there is kind of like a, how do you put it, like a layout that kind of defines how you're going to benefit the community from the activities and the trade that you're undertaking. CICs are good for a lot of activities, but I personally think that if you are looking at a cultural business which requires space, that you want to move more towards ownership structures like cooperatives and community benefit societies. Cooperatives and community benefit societies are similar in a lot of ways. They're both owned by their members and controlled democratically by their members. So the cooperative principles basically demand that in cooperative businesses, all the members get 1 vote per member, regardless of the amount of their shareholding. So that means that if someone holds £100 of shares in your cooperative or CBS, and someone else holds £10,000 of shares, holding a greater value of shares doesn't afford you any greater voting power. So it means that voting power can't be bought, which is a great way to like instill the democracy within the business so that everyone starts out on an equal footing, everyone gets an equal say. The difference between cooperatives and community benefit societies are that cooperatives can be for profit in the sense that they can distribute their profit as dividends to their members. So if a cooperative, you know, turns over £100,000 in a year, but its overheads are only £50,000 and it's got 50k lying extra in its bank account, that'd be nice. They can basically pay that out in the form of dividends to their members. Crucially, with the community benefit society, you can't pay out your profits to members. What you can do is pay interest on members' shareholdings. So, for example, if someone were to invest in Sister Midnight, we're going to pay you 3% interest on your shareholding. So if you invest £100 in our community benefit society, then starting in year 2 of operating, we'll be paying 3% interest on that. So you would get £3 back. The way that we're doing that is in the form of vouchers to be used at the venue, but people can request it in cash if, for example, they're an investor that lives overseas and they're not likely to come down and get a pint anytime soon. And then you've got charities, which they come with some pros and some cons. We considered becoming a charity. You can become a charitable community benefit society, or you can just be like a straight up charity. It comes with certain benefits when you're buying and operating buildings. For example, charities don't have to pay stamp duty land tax on the purchase of buildings as long as the building is being used for the charitable purposes of the organisation. Charities also get an automatic 80% reduction in council tax, and that can be topped up to 400% relief as long as their local authority is willing to provide them with that. It also means that they don't pay corporation tax, which community benefit societies do. So there are a lot of financial reasons why you might want to become a charity, but for certain types of businesses, it does become a little restrictive to be a charity. For example, serving alcohol is generally not considered to be a charitable objective by the Charities Commission. So in our case, if we'd wanted to register as a charity, we would have had to create Sister Midnight Community Venues Limited, the charity which owns the building, and then create a separate company which is wholly owned by the charity, which operates as a sort of trading arm and is responsible for like overseeing the licensing and the sale of alcohol. But what that does is it divides up the way that people who are your shareholders have control over the business. So if we were a charitable community benefit society and that community benefit society owned the building but didn't actually operate the venue, then our shareholders would only have a say in how that building is leased out to the trading arm or how that building is managed. They wouldn't actually have a say in how the sort of day-to-day running and like operational management of the venue itself works, because that would be contractually leased out to the trading arm. And even though that's wholly owned by the charity, it just creates this layer of separation, which makes it more difficult to have these kind of mechanisms in place for governance from the community. So that was like a key reason why we decided to go with being a straight community benefit society rather than a charitable one. Also, charities have like different reporting requirements, and whilst as like any incorporated company, like you will have reporting requirements, there will be accounts that you have to submit to HMRC or Companies House at the end of each tax year. It does get a little bit more complicated when you're a charity, and I think you have to go through like a full auditing process, which can cost a little bit more and is a bit more time consuming. So there's that to bear in mind as well. I think the other thing that came into mind when we were thinking about whether we wanted to become a charity because of the benefits of like reduced council tax and stuff was, should a good business operating in its community actually want to not pay council tax? Yeah. You know, so there is this thing of like, yeah, it's great because you're doing like a huge service to the local community and you're saving maybe 30 grand a year, depending on what your council tax band is. But ultimately, also I should say, when council tax, this is actually called business rates, but it's the same thing as council tax. It's just what businesses pay instead. Like there is a thing of like, if you're a good community business, like maybe you should be paying back into your local authority and helping them to support the services that they're running for the benefit of the wider community. I don't know, like you could get into the whole argument of like whether money that's put into council tax and business rates actually gets appropriately spent by local authorities and whether it really benefits the community. But like in our specific case, we felt that like this sort of core ethics of what we're doing, like we didn't actually want to be avoiding paying business rates if we could, because it goes into paying for services which benefit the entire wider community. So I guess there's that to consider in terms of what you're doing, you know, like depending on like what your community business is, you might feel that you have like specific charitable aims or like specific benefits to the community that actually like, yeah, fair enough, like the work that you're doing does warrant you having that discount and being able to like better support your services. You know, particularly if you're running something like a homeless shelter, like, yeah, you need more money available to support vulnerable people. And whilst like we do want to support vulnerable people, we are going to be a trading business selling alcohol, and ultimately our business is going to be putting on really sick punk gigs. So we like didn't feel like that was enough of a charitable objective to warrant a 20 grand a year discount in business rates. So there's kind of like a lot to consider in terms of the different structures. But whilst we can't talk you through like all the ins and outs of like the different structures and what might be appropriate for everyone's different community businesses, there are places that you can go and get really solid advice that you don't need to go away and fact check. A couple of organizations that we've worked with, particularly if you're thinking of setting up a community pub or like a community shop, Plunkett Foundation was super helpful to us. They have advisors who are really clued up on all this kind of stuff, and can tell you a lot about the different appropriate structures. And I think just like seek that advice because it is out there. Also trying to link up with like a community practitioner. So we are working with someone called Dave Boyle, who specializes in launching community share offers, which we'll get onto in our next step. But there are these practitioners out there who have a whole host of knowledge, and you can get funding to work with them, and they will help you decide on the most appropriate legal structure. So it doesn't have to be one of the first things that you do. We didn't actually settle on a legal structure until what, like 2 months ago, 3 months ago? Yeah. Like we'd registered as a community benefit society back in April, but we were still considering a charitable conversion up until like July. So don't think that like once you've set up your business that's that. Like there's always like room for maneuver and room for you to take advice on like as you narrow down specifically what you're doing, what's going to be most appropriate for the services that you're trying to deliver and the kind of like governance structures that you want to employ within your business. Speaking of getting advice on this, God, we're doing so many great segues. Segue into step 3.
Every time I can tell when you're about to do it, because you start getting really excited.
So excited to be able to tell you that the next step is funding. So there are so many funds out there to help you set up a community business. It's just about how you identify them. For us, we were really lucky that we got linked up with the community share practitioner, Dave Boyle, our hero, pretty much from the get-go. And so he was able to point us in the direction of a lot of the funds that we were eligible for. But if you don't have a community practitioner that you're working with straight away, don't worry, because there's still ways that you can find it. I think the first thing is speaking to your local authority. In our case, obviously we have local authorities within London, but we've also got the GLA, which kind of like oversees all of the greater London area. And they were super useful. So we got in touch with them. They pointed us in the direction of a couple of different funds, including the Boosting Community Business London Fund, which we had success in 2 tracks on, to a total of £14,000.
Damn.
Yeah.
And today we got Architectural Heritage Fund.
Today.
Yeah.
Very fucking
We got
day.
12
Sorry, excuse my French.
Yeah, it's a really good day, really good day. Yeah, we got £12,000 plus for that one as well, so that was really good.
Oh my god.
And that's the kind of excitement about it. Once the application's out there, if you get at least one back, it's like the most exciting thing to receive back ever.
And
Like,
what are you using that money to like pay your wages, like working on the?
depends what the application is. So most places will ask in their funding application, like what specifically in your project, which say maybe like 1 year to like 3 years, like at this point in time, what do you need this money for? And you really have to kind of prove that. So for example, I mean, Lenny, do you want to take up on legal?
Sorry, am I disrupted the flow?
No, I'm just trying to think in my mind. It's like there's a lot of legal complications that also come in with acquiring a property. So something that we had to do is try and find funding for legal fees, which can be so much money. Never knew that before. But yeah, so we've been kind of like, we just confirm that today. But yeah.
The fund that we got today will pay like £5,000 of our legal fees, but the total cost of the legal help that we are seeking is 27.5k.
Yeah.
So we got a little way to go. But there are a lot of different funds out there that target different things. So for example, the Boosting Community Business London programme, which I think is being renewed, that helped us with all our really early setup costs. So that was things like paying the advisors that we work with to tell us how to do things and what to do next. Paying for registration costs, so like the cost of registering as a community benefit society and having all our rules set up. And you can find out about the kind of funds that will help you with these really initial costs by just speaking to some of the key funders. And in the community business space, the ones that I would approach are, as we said, like your local authority, or if you're London based, definitely go straight to the GLA. Particularly because Sadiq Khan is like quite hot on community businesses, so he's got a lot of funds going on at the moment. Power to Change, another really good one. And also Plunkett Foundation that we've already mentioned. National Lottery actually have like a surprising amount of funds. It's always worth checking their website and just trawling through what they've got. And they're actually super helpful as well. Like some of their funds, you'll read them and the language is like not particularly clear as to what they actually want to fund, but just get on the phone to them and tell them the idea that you've got and just be like, are there any funds that you think we would be eligible or that would be like appropriate for us? And they'll be able to guide you through. Alex, is it? You got a hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say also the Hive, because that can be not funding, but it'll be funded support to get the expert advice, and also Unlimited, which can be a little bit tricky if you're looking at doing a pure co-op social business, but depending on how you frame what you're doing, because they are kind of keen on social entrepreneurs first and community businesses second, but you can sort of use the correct language so they can tick their boxes, shall we say.
That's interesting. I haven't heard of Unlimited, so maybe we'll research them after. Thank you. The Hive are a really good one. We did apply to the Hive, but we didn't get funding from them because there was kind of like a crossover in what they were delivering versus what Boosting Community London was delivering. So like kind of the work that they could have helped us fund with like advisors and stuff was already being funded elsewhere, but the Hive are definitely another one to check out. And also Arts Council England. Now, Arts Council, in my personal opinion, no one quote me on this because they funded me quite a lot, but they're a real ball ache to deal with. Basically, all I can say with Arts Council is if you're making an application, they will ask you a question, and the question will be like, tell us about your business. That sounds really fucking straightforward, right? Tell us about your business. You just tell them what your business is. No. Go and download the guidance for the program that you're applying to, and you'll see that they actually say in their guidance that when they say tell us about their business, what they actually mean is tell us about these 5 really specific things, and we want you to exactly answer these questions. If you don't, we're going to discard your application pretty much straight away. Yeah. So specifically with Arts Council, but really with all funds you apply to, like, don't take the questions at face value. Always read the guidance where it's supplied, because it is there to tell you exactly what they want to hear. And a lot of it is a bit of a box ticking exercise. And as long as you read that guidance, you know what it is that they're expecting you to tell them about, you'll be able to answer the questions in an appropriate way, and it will make it more likely that you'll be able to access funding from them. So that's the super frustrating thing about the funding landscape, is that like they don't say what they mean. They never say what they mean. It's really annoying.
And they really are purely only searching for their personal bullet points, aren't they? Like the best way to compare it would be like an exam paper, and then like
it's like doing your GCSE.
GCSEs, like here's the OCR exam paper, here's all the answers. You
when
have
they say
to...
like what is the significance of birds? And you're like nationalism.
Yeah. So
like it is a bit of a mystery working with some funders, but as well, just like don't forget that they know that their funding applications are really confusing, and like don't be scared just to call them up or email and be like, I'm not actually sure what you mean by this question, because they will be able to help you and give you the support to apply. Like most of the people who work in these funding institutions, like they want people to get this support, so like don't be scared just to like ask for that help.
Sorry, the sounds dropped, and I thought it was just me, but
Can you hear that now?
It's great. Let's do a little live check on sound.
All right.
Do you want to sing a song? Just to check.
No, I don't.
This is my that's not my normal. This is my normal relative speaking voice. Can you hear me?
yes.
Good. Okay. Cool. Is that okay though? Is it
Just
saying
saying it's nearly half past.
nearly half past? Okay. So
Don't worry, we're getting there. We're finishing. We're finishing
So
stuff.
I'll stop.
Yeah. Come to the mic.
Regarding funding, is there funding for like research and development before you start?
Yeah. So there are a lot of funds that will enable you to do like really early work on figuring out what it is that you want to do, and is it possible to do it, and doing like, even there are funds that will facilitate community consultation. So yeah, I think it's a good point that you brought up. You don't have to have like a really solid business plan to get a lot of this funding. Like you can just go in with a fairly vague and like non-committal idea of what it is you want to do and what you want to achieve and how you're going to go about it. And like, as long as they can see that you have like a genuine drive to see a project through, like funders will often be very happy to give you the money and the resources that you need to like build a more comprehensive business plan and like move towards completing your project. So yeah, don't be scared to like approach funders if you're still in like super early stages, because a lot of these funds actually are geared up to people who are just starting out. So that kind of support is out there. But
so it's like power to change, one of them. Like if you can sort of like name a few funders that are open to research and development funding.
Or kind of all of the ones that we've touched on really have different funds, like Power to Change, definitely. Plunkett Foundation for sure, although they are kind of more specific to like pubs and like community shops and stuff. But they're a great one to talk to anyway, because they're often more than happy to signpost you to like other funding partners that will like help with other types of projects. Arts Council, I think, does have some. Architectural Heritage Fund is another one that has like very early stage like viability grants. So if you're working with a specific building which has like architectural importance or heritage importance, and that doesn't just mean it has to be like grade 2 listed, like our pub isn't grade 2 listed, but AHF are interested because of like the sort of vague historical importance, which just means that it was built a while back and has some nice tiles.
And do your research well, because it can be an absolute minefield what you can unveil in terms of funding, because obviously history is such a I don't know, it's a big part of funding, and a lot of people want to preserve history, and so if it's grade listed, no way. I mean, I love this part of the project the most, but like if it's grade 2 listed, great. If it's not, search for like a tile or like wood flooring or something, anything that can just, you know, you can call out it's heritage or
George might have
exactly. Even outside of the like physical architectural heritage, like there's a lot to be said about just like the history of buildings, you know, even if it was just like, you know, like in our case, it's a pub that was built in the 1930s, but there's been a pub on that site for like 250 years, and there's like some cultural links around it. That's the kind of stuff that funders often want to hear. But funding applications and getting grants is only like a small part of the picture in funding these kind of projects. And particularly if you're looking to own a building and purchase a building like we are and bring it into community ownership, which I highly recommend, you're going to need a lot of money, particularly if you're doing it somewhere like London. The capital requirements for our project are about 3.3 million. So yeah, you know, it's big figures that we're working with. Yes, it terrifies us every single day to be talking in millions. Like, no, we are not comfortable with it, but you just
not done it before.
No, never.
It's a lot.
Just on that, it's you very quickly get used to the imposter syndrome of just talking in millions, and it's fine. The anxiety eventually ebbs. Just to reassure you all, anyone who's thinking of buying a multi-million-pound building.
Yeah.
I just imagine it without all those. It's totally fine. But the other ways that you can get funding, obviously mortgages and commercial loans. There are lenders out there that will lend to newly constituted groups, people who don't have a trading history, people who aren't necessarily going to be running businesses that are deemed to be profitable as per your typical high street banks. The two that we've identified and targeted are Ecology Bank and Triodos Bank. So I'd highly recommend speaking to them if you're going to have any lending requirements. Another really useful thing that we found out is that Architectural Heritage Fund can loan up to £1 million towards the capital costs of purchasing a building. So that's another good one to look into. Also, for some of you who are at the other session for Summer School last week, we spoke a lot about Public Works Loan Board and SIL funding, and these are basically routes by which your local authority can fund you. Public Works Loan Board is a loan facility that all local authorities, even parish councils in the UK, have access to. It comes direct from the Treasury, and if they decide that there is a piece of essential local infrastructure that they need for their local authority, that could be like bus stops or a new train station or a community pub, they can basically go to the Treasury and say, hey, we need £3 million to make this happen, and they can get that in the form of a loan over 60 years at super low interest rates. I think the current rate is 2.8%. So that's a really good one to identify. If you need really significant funding, definitely lobby your local authority, see what they can do in the way of Public Works Loan Board. SIL funding stands for Community Infrastructure Levy. Basically, it's like a fee that developers pay per square foot of land or property that they develop in the borough. So when you've got someone like Peabody building a 70-story tower block in the centre of Lewisham, for every square foot, they have to pay money to the council so that the council has a little pot to build the other community services that they're going to need as a result of 700 new people living in the borough. So that can sometimes be dished out in the form of grants that you can apply to through your council website, but sometimes it just means pushing your local council. So definitely get a local councillor involved in what you're doing. As soon as you have legs to your project, just email around all the councillors and just let them know and get them on board, because that's absolutely crucial.
Because actually finding out who the right person to talk to in your council is quite hard.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best, that we have a local councillor on our steering group, and I think having someone like that to be able to know who the right person to go to and how to do it in the right manner is really, really important, because we don't have any history of being involved in that kind of stuff. So,
and that's another thing as well, even just getting the council on your side is one of the most important things you could do, because you could go into a project where you don't have aligned visions. So another thing to do that's really important is research through the council what their objectives are. They usually set them maybe every 5 to 10 years, depending on what they've stated they'll promise. A lot of the promises don't tend to happen, but usually it does conduct towards more of a greener future. It will be I can't even think, trying to expand local economies. It's usually a little bit tick boxy again.
it's a bit like us with Lewisham being Borough of Culture in 2022, something for example, a project like this, we can pitch that to them in some sort of way to get them behind us.
And housing, because
And housing.
one of our biggest issues in Lewisham is the housing crisis.
one thing I do think that's definitely swung our council to support us is that we're going to be hopefully acquiring a pub which will have 7 flats above. But I do know of other community projects around the UK that have a completely different story, where they're combating against the council because they're not providing housing but providing something else for the community. So there's a lot of different kind of situations you can find yourself in, but getting a council on board is definitely the best thing you can do politically.
Just on that point, if anyone is trying to set up a community business and they come up against this like situation where perhaps a developer actually wants to develop it in housing and you want to keep it as a pub or a shop or like a community club, definitely drive the angle with your local council of the value that it brings to the community and like the value that it adds to property in the area. So like people want to move to Lewisham because there are great venues and great pubs, and if you keep turning them all into flats, then there's going to be nothing here and no one's going to move here, and then you're just going to have a dead economy. So like you do have to play their own game a little bit and remind them of like the actual economic value that cultural businesses have, because like there is a huge economy even around just like live music. I can't remember like the statistic for what it's worth in the UK, but it's a multi-billion-pound economy that we have. So like there are huge financial contributions from the cultural sector towards the UK economy, and like brush up on those stats. And also, yeah, like V said, like find out what your local council's objectives are. If you go onto their website, they'll often have a list of like policies and like planning frameworks for the future that can kind of tell you a bit about their wider vision for the borough, and basically just find like where you're ticking the boxes, like V says, and like really continue to pitch that to them. Like so much of this is a tick box exercise, and I really don't like it, but it does make it quite easy in some ways.
And it's very copy and paste, and it can, if you're not sure exactly what you want to do, like if you might have like multiple ideas and you're not sure necessarily what path you want to go down, how to take it, just even do the research first and then even create your business plan around some of the objectives that you find like in your community. So like, because that will obviously definitely entail that it'll be a bit more of a successful business plan, even though that not one pub has failed in the UK that is community owned.
We like this. So speaking of community ownership, it kind of brings us on to the last way that you can raise capital that we're going to talk about, and that is community shares. And that's basically what we're doing with the Ravensbourne, and we're launching our community share offer next week. Insert plug here, can we get our like website typed in or something? But basically community shares are a type of non-transferable withdrawable share capital, which is a really like annoying and confusing legal way of saying basically it's shares that you buy in a business that you can't transfer or sell to anyone else. Thanks, Evelyn. And you can withdraw them from the society eventually. So how community shares work is, if you're a community benefits society like us, you can launch a share offer which invites your community to invest in your business, and it gives you the capital that you need to grow. So for our share offer, we are offering shares starting at £100. So anyone can buy a share in Sister Midnight Community Venues Limited. It makes them a member of the society, which gives them full voting rights within the society. So they get a right to vote on important things like at the AGM, vote to elect the board of directors. They can even stand to become elected as a director themselves, and just gives them a say in the day-to-day running of the business. It also means that when you buy shares and become a member, you are part owner of the society and all its assets. So in our case, anyone who buys a share in Sister Midnight is going to hopefully become a part owner of the Ravensbourne Arms once we acquire the building. Shares kind of work quite similar to like a bank account, like a savings account. So you give us your money now, we're going to use it to make this really sick pub. Starting in year 2, we'll pay you interest, so you get a little bit of money back on your shares, and then eventually you'll be able to take your money out and get it back subject to the rules of the society. So this is a really great way to source finance from your local community that doesn't involve people actually just giving up money permanently to you. You're just asking them to invest in your business, and eventually you'll be able to pay them back. there isn't like a lot of financial gain from an investor point in terms of investing in community shares. Like obviously you do get interest, which is slightly better than the interest rate on your standard savings account, but there's not like a huge financial gain. So really the incentive is for people to invest because it's going to bring benefit to them or the community they exist in. To launch a community share offer, you need to work with a community share practitioner to get yourself properly constituted. Only co-ops or community benefit societies can issue community shares. So if you were a CIC or a charity, this isn't something that you could do. It's a great way to get people more involved in your community business, because once they're a shareholder, they're kind of more committed to seeing that business succeed. When you invest in community shares, your capital is at risk. So if you invest £100 in Sister Midnight and it turns out we're already shit at running a pub and it all goes tits up, excuse the French, there is a chance that you wouldn't get your money back. You can read in our business plan about why we don't think that will happen. We've got a whole section on this. But like obviously the basis of investing is that the capital is at risk. So when you launch a community share issue, you have to be really sure that you've got a solid business plan and that you've clearly demonstrated all the sort of things that could go wrong and why they shouldn't go wrong, you know, what mitigation strategies you've put in place. In the case of like raising money to buy a property, it's generally quite a sound investment, especially in London, because like property here generally doesn't tend to depreciate in value. So if you're asking people to invest towards the cost of purchasing a pub, then even if the business that's going to be operating from that pub fails, you've still got the value of the building, which people's shares can be backed against. So again, in our example, if the business did go really badly and we had to close down and sell the building, we've got a building worth £2.5 million in our assets that we can sell and get money back from, that we can then give to shareholders as long as all our debts are paid off. And in the instance that we didn't have enough money to pay back everyone's shareholding, everyone's shares get paid back at a reduced rate pro rata, which basically means, say we held £100,000 worth of shares, but we only had £50,000 left over after selling the building and buying our debts, everyone would get half the amount of shares that they put in. Yes, we should be eligible for social investment tax relief, Alex. The issue that we're having, which a lot of societies will come up against, is HMRC basically doesn't issue societies with a UTR when they form. You have to wait for up to 4 months for it to be delivered in the post. Something that you can do is get your MP to lobby for HMRC to give you a UTR earlier. We're doing that, but it's very difficult.
Is your MP Vicky Pottscroft?
Yeah, and she's sick.
Yeah.
But crucially, without that UTR, you can't apply for advanced insurance of social investment tax relief. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, community shares are more often than not ineligible for a form of tax relief called social investment tax relief. It basically means that the first £1.5 million of investment put into any community business, investors are eligible to get 30% of the value of the shares that they invest back off their tax bill liability. So say you've got a tax bill of like £2,000 at the end of the year, but you've invested £2,000 in community shares, then you would get 600 quid off your tax bill, making your total tax bill £1,400 instead of 2,000. So it's quite a good way to not only encourage people to invest, but if you're a potential investor in community businesses, it's a way to save on your tax liability. How big a risk do you see in a couple of big shareholders wanting to withdraw shares at the same time after, say, 3 years? Well, the withdrawal of shares is always going to be on the basis of the rules of the society, and most societies of our structure will have a rule in place that says you can only pay back shares if the society is able to. So although, for example, in our case, we're aiming to pay back about 37.5k of the shareholding each year, say someone has 50k in shares and they want to take it all out at once, we could pay it back, but if we think that that's going to be detrimental to the viability of the business, it's written in our constitution that we actually don't have to, and that we can ask them to delay their request to withdraw their shares, or we can, you know, speak to them and say, well, hey, you can take 25k now and 25k next year. So there is a way to protect yourself from shareholders just withdrawing huge sums at once. And you can write it into your rules that, like, yes, we're aiming to pay back shares after 3 years, but it's not just suddenly everyone can take all their money out. It has to be on the basis that it's affordable for the society and doesn't put it in any financial risk. So that's not necessarily something you need to be concerned about, as long as you're super upfront with your investors and just let them know at the beginning that withdrawal is subject to the terms of the society, and they can't expect just to be taking huge chunks of money out if it's not going to be viable for the business.
Do people who don't invest get a democratic vote then? So you have to
No,
pay?
you have to pay it, and this is part of the reason why we've launched an affordable share scheme. We wanted to keep our share price as low as possible, but obviously you have to consider, if you make your share price £20, how many people are just going to invest £20 when they could invest a lot more? And when you've got huge capital requirements like we do, we're trying to raise £500,000, you have to kind of weigh up the pros and cons. So although our minimum share price is £100, we've created a scheme where anyone who can't afford that minimum price can make an application to us for an affordable share, which only costs £25, which affords them voting rights in society. We have kept the application super simple, which is what I would recommend anyone do if they were going to follow a similar kind of model, because you don't want to keep putting barriers in place to getting people involved. So ours is basically just tell us why you would like to be considered for an affordable share, and stipulates that you don't have to tell us about specific figures relating to your income and expenditure. Just, you know, if you're an unpaid intern or a student or just on a low wage, just tell us that so we can take it into consideration. And then the second question is, how would you benefit from being a member? You know, what can you bring to the society? How do you see yourself being involved? So there are ways that you can sort of run your share offer with a minimum price that, you know, objectively might seem quite high, but still create these mechanisms by which people on a low income can get involved and can get membership so that they have a democratic say in the society. And I think that's really, really important, because you've got to remember that for some people, £100 is like, yeah, maybe just like a little chunk of their paycheck, and it's like quite doable. Maybe it's the same amount they'd whack into any other savings account, but for a lot of people, £100 is like a month of food or more. And like going without that is just like not feasible. So creating these ways where it's like, yeah, if you can only afford a little bit, that's absolutely fine. Just let us know why that is and like what it is you want to bring. Great, you can still be involved.
And I think another thing to add to that as well is that we've also offered for people to either split shares. So for example, a group of 4 friends can get together, club together 25 quid each, but then you only list one name on the member on the application, so that when it comes through you only have one vote because you have one share, but you can divide that vote between 4 people, and obviously that comes down onto a more personal basis how you do that. But you can also gift a share, which I think if, for example, you have a business plan that's only like it's a community plan, but then at the same time it is only realistically going to be not necessarily suitable, but be mostly attractive to, say, a certain demographic. It allows people the opportunity, for example, grandparents to gift a share over to grandchildren or people that they know, people that basically might have the reserves or the money in place to afford a share, but then they can write down as a member to be someone else, either in their family or a friend. Because I think that's a really important way of getting people to invest, because if it's not something they want personally, it might actually benefit someone else within their family, and it might be a nice thing to kind of share because it's quite different. But yeah, there's lots of different ways that you can kind of make it affordable, but I think that's one thing that we wanted to focus on, because what's the point in having a community business if no one can afford it, realistically?
Yeah, exactly. You've got to make it as accessible as possible, otherwise you're not really a community business if you're not making it open to as many people in your community as possible. Yeah, hear, hear. So step 4 is identifying the kind of skills that you're going to need to make your business happen. So it's really helpful when you're starting out on these kind of projects to think like, what kind of skills and expertise do you actually need to pull this kind of thing together? And in some cases, like if you've got a group where there's like gaps in your skills and knowledge, like that can be paid for. Like, for example, none of us are accountants, so we paid an accountant to produce our financial model, and that worked fine for us. If we needed the advice of a solicitor, we could have paid for a solicitor. But the more people with more diverse skills you have on your group, the better, because you can pull from everyone's knowledge and experience, and it just really speeds up the process and will like create a sort of better rounded business proposition. There are some skills which, like, regardless of your business type, are just always going to be useful. So like accountants, lawyers, people who work in HR, like recruitment, all of these kind of skills just sort of translate across to pretty much every business. And it is really vital that you find people with those skills. I think you would be surprised, like, no matter what kind of angle of community business you're coming from, there are always people out there who have these skills and want to help. And it's just about putting the call out. So like, we formed a working group fairly early on. We were kind of conscious of the way we went about getting people involved in the project. Because we're 3 women in our 20s, a lot of what we came up against in the early stages of the project was middle-aged white men telling us how to do shit.
We had a project manager at one point. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and you know, we didn't enjoy that. No one wants to be mansplained to. So we started out by making a working group and having it on a purely advisory basis. So we were very clear with the people who are helping us, like, you're involved in this project, you're helping us to shape it. We are seeking your advice on a voluntary ad hoc basis. You do not have any control over the ultimate decision making. Whilst we'll take on board your advice, it's us 3 who's in charge. And you know, particularly if you're coming at creating a community group and you're from any kind of like marginalized group or disadvantaged background, I think that way of like getting people to help you and setting those barriers early on of like, you're here in an advisory capacity is like quite an important thing, and kind of test the ground with people. You know, you'll get to know the people that you're working with and who are helping you out, and figure out, are their intentions genuine? Are they the kind of people that you mesh well with and you can work with? Do they bring a lot to the project? Do you want to involve them at a higher level and have them involved in decision making? For us at the moment, we have just kept ourselves as the 3 directors of the society. So whilst we've got like a really large group of people working with us, and whose like advice we do take on board and who do have like a say in the project on a legal basis, at the moment it's us 3 who make the decisions. But once the share offer is completed, we'll appoint 4 additional members of the board who will make decisions alongside us, and that will be an interim board of like 18 months, and after 18 months those 4 people will stand down, and people can be re-elected from the member base. Me, Verity and Sophie will serve as permanent members until we are expelled or removed because of the rules of the society, if we do something really wrong, or if we just decide to leave. So do have a think about the way that you get people involved in the project. It's like something that we talked about last week, was how like ego intersects with community projects. And like it is a really tricky thing to navigate. So I don't want to sound like the voice of doom, but like just like give people time to see how they fit with what you're doing before you like commit to anything. Working on these kind of projects is super intensive, and it requires spending a lot of time with people and making a lot of difficult decisions, and like just don't do it with anyone that you don't really trust, is basically what I'd say. And I know that maybe that sounds counterintuitive going into a community project, but when you've got a lot at stake, I think just like be cautious of how the routes that you create for people to get more heavily involved with the project.
I think one of the good things that we actually ended up doing was creating our working group first, which we said was on like a kind of an advisory volunteer basis, and then from that, the people who were quite active and like really directly involved and like keen to really help more, we then brought onto our steering group. So kind of that way of forming a team was quite helpful, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think another thing that always picks us back up as well, and I think we even had this conversation the other day, is when you're in a position where you suddenly feel like everything's just going to collapse beneath you, it's really good having a support network of people, both professionally and in terms of like even just friends, that you can just basically remind you that what you're doing is great and that lots of people would like it to happen, and it's not just one big kind of like waste of time. I think your kind of mental health can tie into it, but it's really important to have that kind of structure beneath you. And for us, in some ways, it can be the working group, maybe some days, another day it's each other. Definitely can't do a community project alone. So if you're doing it for yourself, probably wouldn't recommend it. Because and it's all about, just like, even though if you have a vision, if you're the person that's guiding it, it's about like, how can you then kind of like recreate your vision with other people's thoughts in mind, etc. And just, I just think having that working group is important from the start, but making sure you have a really, really good team initially to start with that doesn't really have many cracks, and if they do, talk about it. That's the best advice I think that we got, wasn't it, from Dave? Like, if you've got any shit now, dish it out, because once it gets crazy, it goes so bad and you'll be crazy at each other. And I think that's like the most important thing. Team is everything.
Just make sure that the people that you're going into this with are like really aligned with your vision and your ethics. Like, talk about that up front, because you don't want to get like 6 months down the line and find that you like differ on some really fundamental ethical issue that's going to like inform how the whole project goes forward. We've been really, really lucky in starting this out. Like, we just kind of like fell into it and it's worked perfectly, and we've like really not had any conflict or disagreements at all, which maybe is just testament to how great these guys are, and like how we've just been able to like work really productively together. But you know, when these issues do come up, like, you just have to talk about them.
And they realistically as well, I think that you can come to points where people butt heads, and that might be on a personal basis, but if this decision's made based upon the business, it is separate from yourself. And I think that one way to move forward is realizing that it's a community project, and so you have to just drive that kind of like narrative of like, of course you have, like, we have a particular vision, but if we meet and come along with other professionals that might have a vision that could maybe amend ours or add to ours or change it in some way, you consider it, never just deflect it or deny it based on the fact that it's not yours. And like, that's the kind of like, I think core, like, I think the important thing is like moving forward, and I think for us three as well, it's worked for us, that we are really, really we all kind of come to a certain agreement at the end of the day, I think. Like, even if we do differ, and we have difference of opinion on loads of different stuff and different skills, none of us have professional skills. None of us are like legal advisors or architects or things. I'm not old enough to be an architect yet. So like, don't also feel in a position that you're not qualified to do it, because no one's qualified to do anything realistically. You just got to try it, I think. So
it is like kind of interesting how these projects come together with like all the different people that work in them, and like especially if you're working with people you've maybe not worked with before. Like, obviously we didn't know each other really well when we started out the project, but like we had the benefit of like Sophie and V had run nights at Sister Midnight, so like you get a little feel for like what like who people are and like where their heart's at, kind of thing, which is really helpful. So I guess like, if you do have the benefit of being able to draw from your existing community, do it, because there's a lot to be said for like the devil you know kind of thing. But if you don't have that luxury, then just have a lot of conversation up front before you commit to anything, and just make sure you're all really on the same page. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the last bit of how to do all this? Go on, heads up.
So we know about Sister Midnight, and I know sort of like I have met you guys before, not you today, but if you could explain what roles you have, like what roles you play within the community, and also, so it's a pub, but then it's also a venue space, right? So what's your vision for music?
Okay, interesting.
Answer the roles one first.
Okay, roles. I guess like kind of roles. We don't have a defined role, but I'd say we have defined skills, which is the most important thing when you're starting from the beginning. So like, I would say like Lenny leads and heads everything, does a lot of admin, a lot of communication with people that me and So probably have never spoken to before, which is also fine, because it's really important to not constantly be involved in each other's work as well, because it's really important to have division, and then you catch up in the morning or whenever you have your meetings, you translate what's needed, and then you continue. So you're kind of independent but joint. And I think I'm more organizational / I don't even know what I do, but research, documents, research. I'm a reader, I'm an overwriter, and then Lenny condenses everything that I do write. So which is it's really good to have those kind of positions in place. And then so yeah, you're just everything audiovisual completely through and through.
I do a lot of I guess the social, the assets, the design,
the branding has all been
everything,
the campaign video, all the filming,
the flyers,
the
banners, which is both of you as well actually.
But it's also a solution for the branding. I just execute.
I
facilitate the genius that she has brought to the aesthetic of the project.
It's so good.
But yeah, we have a very, very flexible way of working, and obviously there's all different ways of co-working that can function in these kind of flat structured democratic groups, because I think it's important to say that on a legal term we're all at the same level, there's no sort of hierarchy implicit in the structure that we adopted. But I guess just because I ran the Sister Midnight business before, it was one that I started, I've kind of naturally adopted a bit of I want to call it a coordinator role rather than a leader role, because I think we're all leading on the vision, but I'm a very admin minded person and a very sort of organized person, so I'm good at just being okay, you can do this, you do it, kind of dishing out the work,
the guys, and you delegate, and that delegating is a hard thing to learn as well. Learning how to delegate is something that I would never have to learn myself, because I can easily delegate, but I think you found it quite hard to delegate, because it's hard to let go of your work, but you do just have to instruct and trust other people. And I think that's a part of learning and trusting, and as the months go on, it builds more and more and more, and you can understand what people can do and what they want to learn. And
totally. I found that so hard in the beginning, because I've run Sister Midnight quite single-handedly for the whole time, really, and so when you suddenly have to relinquish all this control, being the control freak that I am, I found that really difficult. But you have this is why it's so important to have a group that you trust, because you cannot do all this project by yourself. You will go mad, you will go absolutely legitimately insane if you try to take on the entire workload alone. So you have to have people that you can delegate to, and you have to allow yourself to do that. If you're the kind of person who's like me, who just wants to do everything and make sure everything's all right, just don't and drive yourself mad. I nearly did. But yeah, no, so that's a super important part of it. And also to answer about how, so did you mean how the music and pub are going to work alongside each other?
Yeah. So what's your vision with programming?
Okay.
What's your vision with being a music venue outside of just being a pub, because music is so important and integral to your understanding of the space.
So we want to have quite a clear separation between the pub and the venue space, because I think both offer really important things. The venue will sort of bring people to the building, to the pub, and creates a sense of culture and a community around the space, as does the pub, of course. But I think it's important also that the pub operates in and of itself, so that people don't have to come to the Ravensbourne Arms just to see a gig. They can just swing by for a pint, and they don't have to have a ticket to get in. So the way that we're going to structure the building is that we'll have the pub up front and the venue room through the back, so we can still do ticketed gigs, and have that separate to what we're doing elsewhere in the building. In terms of the programming, we really want to branch out from what Sister Midnight was doing before, because I think it historically had very, very strong roots in the kind of DIY punk scene, a lot of the heavy rock scene, and indie guitar music as well. And that scene is fucking incredible, and there's so much interesting stuff going on, but there's also so many other beautiful music scenes drill and hip hop and grime and jazz are like all flourishing in Southeast London. And Sister Midnight, just by like the size of the venue, often like didn't accommodate some of those genres, like particularly with jazz, you get like a lot of 8-piece bands. It still would not happen down in that basement. Yeah, too tiny. But like we don't have like any limits to the kind of like vision for the programming. Like it will be all genres, all kinds of music. And it doesn't just have to be like bands or like performative music. It can be like spoken word, like it can be music classes with like parents and babies, it can be choirs. So like, yeah, there's a lot that can be incorporated. I'm conscious that we're like running over, if not out of time. So we'll quickly wrap up with the last step, which is obviously running a campaign around starting your community business. Particularly if you're doing share offer, this is like the most crucial bit in terms of like getting people on board. And what you really want to make sure that you're doing throughout your whole planning process is keeping people engaged, so that by the time you get to the campaign, you've still got like a very solid and engaged base of people who know what you're doing and what it is you're trying to deliver and are going to support you through. I think we've already touched on a lot of the things that are really crucial to campaigns, like harnessing like existing networks, reaching out into like Facebook community groups, using social media, hashtags. A cliche, but they still work. Also doing things like flyering and canvassing your local streets, putting up posters in local businesses, asking people to put up posters in their windows at home, maybe doing like market stalls, like finding, like V said, like all the sort of pressure points where a lot of people congregate, like train stations and like markets and shopping centers, and trying to like get flyers out. Really, like the key to a successful campaign is to get off to a flying start. So make sure that your existing community are prepped to support you from the get-go. Like particularly with a share offer, like before you even launch it publicly, you probably want to have like a really significant capital already invested, so that by the time you open your share offer, everyone's thinking, oh well, this is definitely going to succeed, because people might only visit your campaign page or like your crowdfunder page once, and you only get one shot at that first impression. So the impression that you want to give them is like, damn, this is going to work. And if you don't do that, then you've like already lost like potential investment. So yeah, just really getting off to like the best possible start is so crucial. Just making sure that you're like really working your existing supporters and your existing networks to make sure that you have that support from the get-go. And just getting the word out, just get as many people as possible to hear about what you're doing. Press is a really great way to do this if you can tap into local and national press. Like we are really lucky that we managed to get someone on our team who has great PR experience and has written like a proper press release for us. So in terms of people with certain skills that you might get involved in the project, like a PR person is a great one, because they'll just know that sort of industry inside out and know how to get people and press engaged with what you're doing. But you know, like we said before, even just like speaking to local press papers is a great way to do it, and just getting it out there on social media. Like I think if you can make your project go viral, probably the press would pick it up eventually anyway, whether you've got a PR person on board or not. So it's really just creating this like mad buzz around what you're doing and getting people excited. And to get people excited, it really just comes all the way back to step one of like, what does your community crave? Because if it's not something that they're craving, they're not going to be excited about what you can potentially deliver. So, you know, to really like deliver a successful campaign, you've got to get all of these steps right along like each step of the way, and just make sure that from the get-go, you know what it is that your community wants and that they are invested in making your project succeed as well. You guys got anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think that was it. That's an amazing finish.
That was really good. Come on.
No, that was all me. That was yeah. Does anyone have any questions or like comments or things they want to ask? If not, I'm just going to assume that we've done a really sick job. But like...
I'm someone, Alex.
Hey. I was just wondering, because reflecting your story compared to mine is really interesting. So thank you very much for sharing that. But also, I was wondering, at the stage you are at now, what do you wish you had known before setting out on this journey?
Ooh.
Sorry for the like bastardy kind of job interview type question, but you know, I was just thinking because I was reflecting on stuff, and then I wonder what you guys would reflect on.
I feel like there's so much. There's so many things that you learn along the way, and I guess it's like a cliche answer, but like maybe nothing, because I've really enjoyed the learning process.
Yeah, that's a good idea actually.
At the same time, like we've come from a sort of position of like we've had a lot of luck, I think, along the way, and so I think just knowing the people to reach out to in the first instance, like if there had been less learning around like figuring out all these different funding partners and like all the different sort of, like you say, existing networks, that would have sped up the whole process quite a lot. But I think also maybe I just wish I'd known that it was possible from the get-go. I think there was like a real turning point for me around December, like last year, where I just realized like actually there is money out there, and like if I can get people invested in what we want to create, we can raise £3 million to buy a pub, even though that seems completely unachievable. So I guess it's not so much like a knowing thing, but I wish that I'd had the confidence just to do this earlier on.
And
and that taps into that imposter syndrome thing, that it's lurking there for many of us, and you know, right through from it's kind of get consolidated by those mansplaining moments, which happen in your 40s as well as your 20s. You'll be delighted to know. So yeah, so you know, things are shifting and changing, but yeah, I think I like that you're enjoying the journey as much as being, you know, getting more and more clarity and more towards what the sort of end goal is. But no, thank you for that.
Can I just add as well, I would say that also for me it was just like have absolutely next to none expectations of a way in which it will go, because every single thing that's come up has taken a completely different direction. And like, I would just say like, don't even try and imagine what will come out. Like we do this a lot. We ruminate over what is going to come from a conversation and whatever, and we always talk about it as well. It never turns out that way, so you're wasting energy.
Totally. Yeah, no, actually I have to second that, because honestly I had it in my head that we were going to go into the share offer with like a mortgage agreement in place, an agreement for sale on the building like already, and like all our funding from like grants completely like agreed and secured, and my God, that has not been the case. We haven't got an agreement on the building. We haven't got a mortgage in place yet, because they want to see that we've got the 500k first before they offer us £2.5 million in funding, which kind of fair enough. That makes sense. So like, you know, yes, there's like an ideal way that these projects go, but just because you're not hitting all these milestones that you thought you'd hit doesn't mean it's not going to succeed. Also doesn't mean that it will. You could hit every milestone. We could have gone into this with an agreement in place and a mortgage in place and all the grant funding that we could like, but it could still flop. So just do it. It's like only sort of advice.
You won't know unless you try. So why not?
Exactly. You've got to be in it to win it, but you can also define what your own definition of success is. So, you know, you're successful right now. You might not have raised 3.3 million, which is nicely 1.1 each, isn't it? So
we'll all be millionaires. Well, no, we won't.
But there's something really interesting around redefining what success is and what that looks like for us, and being, you know, confident of sitting with that and reminding each other and ourselves of it. Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. I'm glad I hung out.
Yeah, because you know, one thing that I've been thinking about, like especially a lot with the anxiety going into the share offer, because it's daunting, and we've spoken about like our worries about it and stuff. But I think like with a project like this, there is only so much you can do. And at the end of the day, it comes down to what your community wants. And like, if they want to invest at the end of the day. And actually, like, if anything, it's been such an amazing learning curve, and also like an example of a structure of what a community in our society and push in all aspects of our high streets, you know.
And I guess also just like not seeing failure as finite. Like, if this doesn't work out and we don't raise the money we need to buy the Ravensbourne arms, like System Midnight will live again. Like, we're gonna find a way to keep doing what we want to do and like learn lessons from this process. And like, maybe a lesson that we might learn is that people don't want to invest £500,000 in 3 women in their 20s trying to set up a music venue. Maybe they do, but like, there's only one way to find out.
Just
like
try.
you say.
Give it a go.
Well, I'd just like to share, I've done 4 community share offers now, and they're always nerve-wracking, they're always terrifying, then they're always suddenly, oh my God, it's so easy, why were we even worried about it? You know, it's doable. I know this is going to happen. I can tell just as an outsider this is going to happen. You've got your geographical audience, you've got your shared valued audience. You can also tap into, like, GCDA's got a massive mailing list, so CELSI, you know, just all of that stuff to kind of get your other comrades and supporters and things in. So congratulations on getting this far, and you know, I'll be putting my hands in my pocket. So I'll see you at the AGM.
Oh, thanks, Alex. Thank you so much, Alex. If it's all right, like, can we get Alex's email off you guys if you're comfortable with that, Alex, just so we could like stay in touch with you?
Yeah, of course. Claire and G are like my, you know, I'm their sidekick. They're my sidekick. I don't know. There's no sidekicks. We're all heroes, heroes. Dig that hole. Yeah, it's easy. I'm on. You can have various emails. I'm also on Twitter and all that kind of thing as well. So it's quite Alex Hart Eco.
Okay, cool. Well, if anyone wants to like continue asking questions and stuff far in the future or later down the line, we like have an email as well, which is info@sistermidnight.org. And just like reach out to us however.
Hit us up.
No, we will respond. We're on it every day. So please ask questions, like the more the merrier. And thank you so
just
much.
stay in touch, like tell us about like what you're doing, and let's get a bit of a network going. I think the more linked up these kind of projects are, the more we can all support each other. Like, obviously, you know, we like Danny, it sounds like what you're doing would link in pretty well with the music venue, and Alex, like, obviously we want to work, we're already working with GDCA and we want to work with CELSI, so like there's all these opportunities to like link up. And Matt as well, like obviously it's another community pub, of course we're going to support and like help out. So just there's like so much that can be done just by like teaming together. So I feel like that's been a huge takeaway for us from the summer school that Horse Hospital has put on, and from being involved. It's just like, it's just so great to meet more people doing this. It's really sick. So thank you to Horse Hospital for facilitating it all.
Absolute joy. I'm just like so gassed, just like, wow, really thinking a lot of this.
I feel like I missed out about like 20 things.
I like to talk about this for hours.
And thanks everyone so much for joining us and sticking around. And this will be recorded and we're going to be sharing it. There's a lot of people who messaged saying that they really wanted to join, they weren't able to, and they're really grateful for recording it, and we'll be distributing the recording and making sure that this like amazing knowledge share gets like spread a lot further, because like fuck me, there are a lot of knowledge that's just been like condensed into this little session. And also we'll send the recording through to everyone who came, if like maybe didn't take notes, or if it might be like 4 times back, so we'll send the recording through to you all as well. And then it's just been like emails in there, just use Google, London. I just like, I don't really have anything smart to say, just like, well, like amazing, well done, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Like, it's great to just chat and to share, and yeah, just can't reiterate enough. Just like get in touch with us if there's anything we can help on. We're not experts, but like we've sort of done it, so we know a few bits and pieces, and we'll share whatever info and little tips we've got.
Cool.
Thank you.
Bye.
We're gonna let you drink this while
Please.
for like 2 hours.
I've drank 2.
See you next week.
Bye.